Right now, you are watching the wrong war. You are watching the television screens. You are looking at troop deployments, missile silos, and diplomatic shouting matches. You are waiting for a kinetic strike that the media tells you will start World War III. But as an analyst of geopolitical systems, let me tell you a terrifying truth. The real war has already begun. It is not happening in the skies. It is happening on the water, and you are completely blind to it. What Donald Trump is engineering right now is not a traditional military confrontation. It is a structural strangulation of the global supply chain. It is a weaponized trade quarantine. The question everyone is asking is, will missiles fly? That is the wrong question. It is an amateur's question. The real question you need to be asking is, who actually survives when the ocean stops moving? My name is Professor Jiang Xueqin. For decades, I have studied the hidden mechanisms of geopolitical power and structural collapse. And what I am seeing right now terrifies me. We are watching the deployment of a system-level weapon that bypasses military defense entirely. It attacks the economic nervous system of an adversary. I call this the choke point inversion trap. It is a mechanism designed to freeze global trade, spike insurance premiums to mathematically impossible levels, and starve an enemy without firing a single bullet. And the most dangerous part, it will not just crush the target nation. It is going to reach directly into your hometown. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly how this trap works. I will show you the math behind the collapse, because what looks like mere diplomatic posturing today is actually the beginning of a global blackout tomorrow. Pay very close attention. Turn on any major news network right now, and what do you see? You see retired generals standing in front of digital maps. You hear anchors debating carrier strike groups, hypersonic missiles, and armored divisions. They are actively feeding you the kinetic illusion. They are analyzing the world as if it is still 1945. They want you to believe power is measured purely in the raw tonnage of high explosives. But let me tell you a secret that every serious structural analyst knows. Kinetic war, bombing cities, and sinking fleets is actually the strategy of the desperate. It is expensive, chaotic, and politically suicidal. The media desperately wants you to look at the shiny military objects. They want you to fear the bright flash of a missile. But true geopolitical dominance does not announce itself with warning sirens. It announces itself with absolute silence. The silence of an empty port. The silence of a frozen supply chain. Here is the fundamental flaw in military analysis you are not being told. In our global economy, you do not need to destroy your enemy's factories to win. You only need to stop raw materials from reaching their shores. You do not need to bomb their power grids if you can guarantee the oil tankers never arrive. This is where Trump's strategy sharply departs from conventional military doctrine. He understands that the ultimate modern battlefield is not a patch of contested land. It is the unforgiving mathematics of global logistics. Most people look at the ocean and just see empty water. Strategic planners look at the ocean and see the vulnerable circulatory system of the world. If you control the critical arteries, you control the heart. Right now, the United States is quietly positioning itself to clamp down on those arteries. Mainstream analysts are completely blind to this because they are waiting for a declaration of war. But this new type of warfare does not require any declaration. It only requires a sudden, invisible shift in the hidden rules of maritime trade. And this brings us directly to the actual weapon being deployed. Welcome to the core of the strategy. I call it the choke point inversion trap. If you imagine a naval blockade, you probably picture a solid wall of gray warships sitting off a hostile coast, firing warning shots at cargo vessels. You picture the Cuban Missile Crisis. Erase that image from your mind. That is not how a modern superpower strangles an adversary. In the 21st century, a blockade is not a military operation. It is a financial and legal weapon disguised as a security protocol. Here is the hidden mechanism that changes everything. To shut down an enemy's economy, the United States Navy does not need to sink a single commercial ship. They do not need to mine the harbors. All they have to do is trigger a mathematical tripwire within the global insurance market. 90% of global trade moves by sea. Every single one of those massive container ships and oil tankers is heavily insured. Usually, the war risk premium for a commercial vessel sailing through a standard route is a tiny fraction of a percent. But what happens when the United States officially declares a critical maritime choke point a contested security zone? What happens when they announce a policy of aggressive maritime inspections to enforce trade compliance? This is the inversion. The military does not stop the ships. The market stops the ships. The moment that zone is declared high risk, the actuaries sitting in offices at Lloyd's of London instantly recalculate. The war risk premium spikes from 0.01% to 5, 10, or even 15% of the ship's total hull value. Overnight, a single voyage becomes mathematically unprofitable. The shipping conglomerates in Athens, Geneva, and Tokyo look at the massive insurance premiums and make a cold corporate decision. They halt operations. They refuse to sail into the choke point. Do you see the brilliance of this trap? The adversary is completely isolated. Their oil imports are cut off. Their export economy is paralyzed, and the United States has not fired a single missile. The enemy cannot fight back because there is no kinetic battle to fight. They are shadow-boxed into submission by financial algorithms and maritime law. But this is where the strategy moves from brilliant to absolutely terrifying. Because when a major global choke point freezes, the damage does not stay contained to the targeted enemy. It immediately shatters the entire global supply system. Let me show you the domino math of a global structural collapse. When a primary maritime artery is severed, the mainstream media will tell you it is a localized regional supply issue. They are lying. The global supply chain is never a static warehouse. It is a highly calibrated conveyor belt. Imagine the Strait of Malacca or the Strait of Hormuz is suddenly designated a high-risk zone. The insurance spikes and the ships stop moving. What happens next? The shipping conglomerates must reroute thousands of vessels around entire continents. A standard 30-day voyage from Asia to Europe suddenly becomes a 45-day journey. You might think a 15-day delay is just a minor inconvenience. But in the unforgiving world of just-in-time global logistics, a 15-day delay is a catastrophic, irreversible system failure. Here is the terrifying math. A modern, ultra-large container vessel burns over 200 tons of heavy fuel every single day at sea. Adding 2 extra weeks to a voyage burns an additional 3,000 tons of fuel per ship. Multiply that by 20,000 active commercial vessels. The demand for bunker fuel skyrockets overnight, triggering an immediate global energy shock. Shipping rates do not just double, they quadruple in days. But fuel costs are only the second domino to fall. The third domino is the global container crisis. Because ships are spending an extra month trapped on the water, the worldwide supply of empty shipping containers suddenly vanishes. Major ports in Los Angeles, Rotterdam, and Shanghai freeze entirely because they cannot load outgoing cargo without empty boxes. The conveyor belt snaps. Tens of millions of tons of agricultural products, critical microchips, and raw industrial materials are stranded on docks. Factories in Germany and South Korea run out of essential components within 72 hours. They immediately shut down production lines. Millions of factory workers are sent home. This is not just a theoretical computer model. This is the exact mathematical sequence of a choke point inversion. The targeted adversary is starving, yes. But to achieve that starvation, the weapon must shock the entire planetary system. A localized naval quarantine immediately metastasizes into a global economic contagion. And this is exactly where the geopolitical chess match stops being an abstract theory on a map. This is where the massive shockwave leaves the ocean, crosses the coastline, and crashes directly into your personal life. Let me bring this geopolitical chess match directly into your living room. When the mainstream media finally reports on this naval blockade, they will use abstract words like supply chain disruptions and geopolitical tension. Do not let those sterilized phrases fool you. What they actually mean is that your personal standard of living is about to be decimated. Within exactly 14 days of this choke point inversion triggering, you will drive to your local gas station and stare at the numbers in disbelief. Because the global shipping fleet is burning millions of extra barrels of fuel to reroute around the blockade, global energy markets will panic. You will not see a slow, gradual increase at the pump. You will see a violent overnight spike. Gas prices will shatter previous records, but that is only the beginning of your nightmare. Next, you will walk into your local grocery store. The shelves that hold imported goods, electronics, and basic agricultural products will start looking suspiciously empty. The global container crisis means the fertilizers and raw materials needed to grow food are stranded on the ocean. Within weeks, the price of basic groceries will surge by 20, 30, or even 40%. You are going to experience a level of hyperinflation that will make the last few years look like a period of economic stability. And then, the real panic begins. As shipping conglomerates hemorrhage cash and factories shut down, the global credit markets will freeze. Banks will stop lending. Small businesses in your hometown, unable to secure inventory or pay exorbitant shipping rates, will go completely bankrupt in waves. Layoffs will accelerate. You will be paying twice as much to survive on a shrinking income in an economy that has suddenly slammed the brakes. This is not a doomsday fantasy. This is the calculated mathematical consequence of weaponizing global trade. If you think this sounds impossible, you need to understand one chilling fact. This exact same strategy is not new. It has been used before by the greatest empires in history to destroy their rivals. Let me now show you the exact historical blueprint. This is the exact point where we must step back from the modern headlines and look at the brutal logic of history. If you think a global trade strangulation is just a new strategy invented in Washington, you are dangerously naive. This is the oldest, most lethal weapon in the playbook of global empires. It is the ghost of empires past. Let us go back to a moment that perfectly mirrors what is happening today. At the dawn of the First World War in 1914, Great Britain did not win the initial land battles. Instead, they recognized that the true vulnerability of the German Empire was its reliance on imported food and raw materials. The British Royal Navy deployed a massive distant blockade across the North Sea and the English Channel. They did not attack German ports directly. They simply mined the critical sea lanes and intercepted neutral shipping. The British strategy was not designed to defeat the German army in a spectacular clash of dreadnoughts. It was designed to starve the German civilian population and industrial base over years. It was a structural war of attrition, and it worked with horrifying efficiency. The German war machine slowly ground to a halt, not because of a single decisive battle, but because they simply ran out of fuel, rubber, and food. The German people starved, their economy imploded, and the empire collapsed from the inside out. Do you see the historical parallel? What the British Empire did with ironclads and naval mines, the United States is preparing to do today with financial sanctions, insurance premiums, and maritime law. The mechanism has evolved, but the brutal, suffocating logic remains identical. You isolate the choke point, you deny the resources, and you wait for the adversary to suffocate on their own isolation. This is not a theory. It is a historical law of gravity that is repeating itself right before our eyes. The blueprint is already written. But history also teaches us that when an empire deploys this ultimate weapon, it triggers an inevitable, cascading series of events. It is a one-way street. Let me now tell you exactly how the next 3 phases of this blockade will unfold over the coming months. Here's exactly what happens next. If you are waiting for a sudden de-escalation, you are completely misreading the system. When a superpower activates a choke point inversion, there is no stepping back. We are now entering a deeply unstable window, and it will unfold in 3 distinct, irreversible phases. Write these down. Phase 1 is the silent freeze. This will happen over the next 90 days. You will not see massive naval battles. Instead, you will see a sudden, unexplained paralysis in maritime data. Commercial tracking systems will show hundreds of massive cargo ships simply dropping anchor in neutral waters, waiting for clarity that will never come. Insurance underwriters in London and New York will officially declare the targeted transit corridors uninsurable. Global freight rates will instantly triple. The media will call it a temporary logistical glitch. Do not believe them. It is the trap snapping shut. Phase 2 is the asymmetric retaliation. This is where the danger spikes. A trapped adversary does not just quietly starve to death. If they cannot break the blockade on the water, they will attack the global nervous system elsewhere. Watch the submarine cables. Watch the international banking networks. The targeted nation will unleash massive, deniable cyber attacks against Western financial institutions and port operating systems. They will try to blind the global supply chain, creating so much economic pain for the West that populations demand an end to the quarantine. This is when your local banking apps and power grids become legitimate geopolitical targets. Phase 3 is the systemic fracture. This is the long-term reality the world is about to wake up to. Even if the immediate crisis fades, the illusion of safe, frictionless global trade will be permanently shattered. We will see the aggressive construction of two completely separate global supply chains. A new economic iron curtain will fall across the oceans. Nations will be forced to choose which maritime security umbrella they operate under, and the cost of every physical good on Earth will permanently adjust to this new, hostile reality. This three-phase progression is simply not a hypothetical scenario. It is the absolute mathematical certainty of weaponizing the ocean. We are watching the complete dismantling of the globalized world order happen in real time. But the most terrifying part of this entire equation is not the macroeconomics. It is who ultimately pays the final, devastating price when the system fails. This brings us to the most tragic, unavoidable truth of geopolitical warfare. When empires clash over maritime choke points, the politicians and generals never pay the bill. You do. The mainstream media will frame this blockade as a necessary strategic victory for national security. They will show you satellite images of empty adversary ports and declare that the United States has won without a kinetic war. But what they will not show you is the silent, devastating wealth transfer happening inside your own borders. Because when the global supply chain fractures, the era of cheap, frictionless abundance permanently ends. The resulting hyperinflation is not a bug in the system. It is a structural tax on the middle and working classes to fund this new shadow war. The true human cost of the choke point inversion trap is a generational decline in your standard of living. You will be told to accept higher gas prices, food shortages, and frozen credit as your patriotic duty. But as an analyst, I must warn you, do not confuse a systemic collapse with a temporary crisis. What we are witnessing is the permanent rewiring of global power. The globalized economy you were born into is currently being dismantled on the oceans, container by container, barrel by barrel. You can no longer afford to be a passive consumer of mainstream news. You must become a student of structural reality. If you do not understand the mechanics of this hidden war, you will be crushed by its economic shockwaves. But there is one final critical piece of this puzzle. While the world is distracted by this naval blockade, a completely different financial trap is being set in the gold and currency markets by the BRICS nations, a direct retaliation that could instantly shatter the US dollar's dominance. I am analyzing that exact mechanism right now, and I will reveal the entire structure in my next briefing. If you want to survive the coming system shock, subscribe and make sure your notifications are on. The real war has only just begun. I am Professor Jiang Xueqin. See you next time.